What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Flexman back on the video. Today we have never seen a prospect like Caleb Downs, man. Shout out to Caleb Downs, man. The goofy, um, the goofy Cowboys fucking goddamn Caleb Downs. I ain't gonna lie, I'm pissed. Not gonna lie, I am pissed for shout the Oli. But if you're new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, man. This is a beautiful pick. I'll give the ops credit. It was a good pick, great pick. And I already know he's gonna be a star. I'm cute about it. I know he's gonna be a superstar in the league. So I promise you, Caleb Downs will be a superstar in the league. Just fuck, it just has to be on the goddamn Cowboys. But anyways, man, let's get into the video, bro.
Saban defense, most first-year players spend half the season just learning how to line
up.
The Downs show.
I remember I'm a Bama, so I know Caleb Downs.
Put up and played like the best guy on the field from week one. The thing about him is that he didn't slowly turn into a star because he arrived on campus as a great player already.
Wait, what's he with? It was for 2 years?
Downs. It's a family business.
So how the fuck I don't
His
remember?
father, Gary, played running back in the NFL for 7 years with the Giants, Broncos, and Falcons. And his uncle, Dre Bly, was a Pro Bowl cornerback who spent 12 seasons in the league. With his brother Josh currently playing receiver for the Indianapolis Colts, you can see that Caleb represents 3 generations of people.
Yo, he kept playing out real.
Like,
he has a brother?
Caleb grew up right in the middle of all that professional experience. His dad had him and Josh lined up in the living room at 5 years old, fully padded and running Oklahoma drills head to head. That's the very first football memory Caleb can even recall.
Hey,
he wasn't watching a game on TV or throwing a ball in the yard. He was doing full contact drills because his dad wanted him to feel the game before he ever stepped onto a field. By the time he reached Mill Creek High School in Georgia, the foundation was already set. He finished his high school career as a top safety and the number 7 overall player in the entire 2023 recruiting class. He had offers from Georgia, Ohio State, and Clemson, but he chose Alabama specifically because of Nick Saban.
Yeah, he wanted to play with the GOAT Nick Saban, but
in college was a straightforward decision, which shows you a lot about a 17-year-old kid who was looking for a challenge. What happened next tells you everything you need to know about his work ethic. A Cowboy scout named Eric Ellingsworth was already visiting East Tennessee State to check on a different prospect when he ran into Gary Downs, Caleb's father, who was coaching on the staff there. Gary mentioned that his son was already going through Alabama's defensive installs before he even moved on to campus. He wasn't just casually watching film, he was actually studying communication concepts while he was still a high school senior. Ellingsworth said that once he finally watched Caleb play as a freshman, he was ready to write the official scouting report immediately. The coaching staff at Alabama already described Caleb as one of the smartest defensive backs Saban had ever coached. And you got to think about that for a second because Xavier McKinney, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Pat Surtain, and Marlon Humphrey all went through the same program. That's the group Caleb is being measured against, and the people who know the program best put him as one of the very top of that list for football intelligence. He showed up at Alabama with an incredible pedigree, and then the games backed up every single word of the hype. So let's talk about what he actually did in that 1 year at Alabama, because the numbers don't justify how absurd he actually was. Downs finished
no, I ain't tripping. It was for you.
His true freshman year with 107 combined tackles, which meant he led the entire roster in that category. He wasn't just the best among the freshmen or the defensive backs, he actually topped the whole team. This wasn't some soft schedule packed with cupcakes either, as Alabama played in the SEC and went to the college football playoff, while Downs served as a leading tackler through all of it at 18 years old.
It was Michigan. I think we played Michigan.
To really understand why that number matters, you have to understand what Nick Saban
we played the cheaters that year
from the player. This isn't a system where you pick a spot, read one key, and react, but rather a complex web of pre-snap communication and rotating coverages. Most freshmen don't even play defense at all, and the ones that do usually get limited reps in specific situations where the risk is controlled. Caleb started every game, however, and he was the one doing the communicating and lining people up. Raw numbers of 2 interceptions, 4 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble still undersell his impact. What the games actually showed was a player who already understood angles the way veterans do, and he constantly chopped his feet when closing in on a ball carrier so he couldn't get frozen by a juke. He would read the quarterback's eyes before the receiver even broke out onto his route, which meant he was already moving by the time the throw left the QB's hands. When he hit, it was downhill and square, with the kind of physicality you expect from an inside linebacker rather than a teenager playing his first college games as a safety. He won the SEC Defensive Freshman of the Year award that season. That trophy typically goes to the best defensive freshman in the best conference in college football, and Downs won it without any real competition. The week after Saban announced his retirement, Caleb entered the transfer portal because his position coach Travarius Robinson had already left for Georgia. The new head coach was Kalen DeBoer, who had no prior relationship with Downs and no built-in trust, and for him, that was enough to move on. He couldn't sit still through a transition period, and he wanted to be learning a new defense and training immediately instead of waiting on a coaching staff to get organized. He received 102 calls in a single day after entering the portal, and every major program in the country was trying to get him. Georgia was considered the heavy favorite given he went to high school less than an hour away from their campus, but Caleb chose Ohio State instead. He cited his relationship with
paid him. They freaking paid him
as a major factor. The portal moment was huge, and where he went next is what turned a great prospect into a generational one. Ohio State took him in as the #1 overall prospect in the transfer portal, and when Caleb touched down, it looked like he'd already been playing there for 3 years. In 2024, his first season with the Buckeyes, Downs put up 82 combined tackles and 8 tackle unit. He was a primary communicator and the guy every other player on that defense keyed off on before the snap. In 2025, he won Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year in the Jim Thorpe Award, which leaves his hand. That requires processing at a level that most safeties develop over several NFL seasons, yet he was doing it in college against Big Ten offenses running counts that most linebackers don't even fully master until their second or third year in the league. Then there's how he handles tight ends and man coverage. The big nickel role requires winning one-on-one against tight ends and slot receivers in space, and Downs does it with technique rather than just raw athleticism. He chops down on the release and attacks the hands while staying hip to hip on crossing routes, and watching him blanket a tight end looks less like a safety and more like a cornerback who rather than just raw athleticism. He chops down on the release and attacks the hands while staying hip to hip on crossing routes, and watching him blanket a tight end looks less like a safety and more like a cornerback who happens to weigh 206 pounds. He admitted after the draft that he got bored in college because the ball wasn't coming his way and the talent wasn't always high level. That might sound like arrogance, but the games show that offenses were genuinely scheming away from him. They would identify his alignment pre-snap and route their
my fault. I don't think was I muted? I might have been muted. But I don't know if I was muted, but I'm gonna just say what I just said again. Yeah, bro was freaking on. We're freaking yeah, Sonny Styles went to the ketchup and mustards. He went to Dallas Cowboys, and Brody went to the and then Caleb Downs went to the
concepts to the other side of the field, and that's exactly what a shutdown player looks like. He just happened to be a safety. What makes all of this more impressive is the variety of defensive systems he operated in during his college career. He played for Saban at Alabama, Jen Knowles at Ohio State in 2024, and then Matt Patricia in 2025. These are 3 completely different systems in 3 years when teams started picking. Safety is one of the least valuable positions in the NFL draft, and that's not really a hot take because the numbers pretty much back it up. Since the year 2000, only 8 safeties have been selected in the top 10 picks. Quarterbacks, tackles, and edge rushers get taken early and often, but teams usually treat safety like a spot you fill in the 2nd or 3rd rounds before moving on to other needs. The few safeties who actually cracked the top 10 during that stretch were almost all physical freaks who made the value argument irrelevant. Sean Taylor stood at 6'2" and weighed 231 pounds while running like a cornerback. And LaRon Landry once clocked a 4.35 40-yard dash. Eric Berry had that same elite athleticism and played more like a linebacker than a deep safety. So teams justified those picks because the players transcended what the position normally looks like. Caleb stands at 6 foot tall and weighs 206 pounds. And since he didn't run the 40 at the combine, he lacks the wow measurements that make a GM forget what position he's drafting. This matters because spending a top 10 pick requires you to sell the choice to ownership and the head coach. Telling a room that a kid is incredibly smart and fundamentally sound is a much harder sell surface from an NFC scout claiming Downs had a partially torn meniscus and a potentially degenerative ACL. That kind of report doesn't even have to be accurate to do serious damage to a draft stock because it just has to exist in the conversation. conversation. Once teams see a red flag like that, a player who was a consensus top 10 talent suddenly becomes a question mark for front offices that were already looking for a reason to pass on safety.
Even though I'm gonna be real, even though I'm an Eagles fan, I'm gonna keep it a buck. I'm always gonna keep it a buck. Yeah, they did. Cowboys definitely they got that pick worth for sure, Leo, and they know it too for sure. Like it's not gonna be questioned. No, oh yeah, he's like that. He's going to be impacting off the rip. No bullshit.
Downs shut down those rumors directly at his pro day by stating his medical showed nothing of the sort, and Pat McAfee later confirmed through independent sources that no issues were flagged. On top of those reports, Caleb never missed a single game across 3 college seasons at Alabama and Ohio State, and a degenerative knee simply doesn't let you stay that durable. When you think about where he landed, you have to remember that Minkah Fitzpatrick, who was also elite out of college coming out of the Alabama program, went 11th back in 2018. Budda Baker was one of the most productive safeties of his generation back at Washington, but fell to pick 36, while Kyle Hamilton went 14th in 2022 because he had the physical profile that made teams comfortable spending that type of draft capital. The question was never whether Downs belonged in that elite company, but rather did teams trust the position enough to pay top 10 money for it. Dallas eventually answered that question by trading up from 12 to 11 and giving up 2 fifth-round picks to jump ahead of Miami. That move showed a front office that did the homework, believed the real medical reports, and they weren't going to just sit back and hope their guy fell one more spot. Christian Parker is only 34 years old, making him the youngest defensive coordinator in Cowboys franchise history, and also the new coach for Caleb Downs. His entire coaching background is rooted in the defensive backfield, and the system he's building in Dallas focuses on versatility and disguise to make offenses wrong before the snap. It's no coincidence they drafted Downs for this specific role. Head coach Brian Schottenheimer described what Parker wants from his nickel defender by saying that the player needs to cover like a corner, tackle like a linebacker, and blitz like a safety. Do you read that job description again, you will realize that it's a perfect word-for-word match for Caleb Downs. No other player in this draft class checks all 3 boxes the way he does, which explains why Christian spent the pre-draft process taking pictures of Downs to the front office. When the Cowboys finally landed Caleb at 11, Parker told Schottenheimer he would finally buy a house after living in a hotel since January. He had been grinding film for months, and getting Caleb was the one thing that made him comfortable enough to finally put down roots in Dallas. The role that Caleb will step into is the big nickel, and we should explain what that actually looks like for a defense run by Christian Parker. In any given game, Downs might start a play in the slot, matching a tight end in man coverage, but on the very next snap, he could rotate into the box as an extra run defender. On third down, you might see him playing center field in a single high look to take away the deep middle, or he could walk up late and come off the edge on a delayed blitz. Having one player handle 4 completely different jobs means this isn't just a scheme fit, but rather a scheme built around entirely one specific player. The Cowboys allowed 31 points per game last year, which marks the worst in the NFL, and the problem was that they lacked a true communicator in the secondary. They needed someone who could get 10 other guys into the right spots so the defense was sound before the ball was even hiked. Caleb was that leader at Ohio State, and every scout who watched his tape talked about his ability to run the show. There's a national scout named Ross Weinsch who's been with the organization of the Dallas Cowboys for 14 years, and he admitted he had never seen a room as excited for a player as they were the moment they took Downs. These are people who watch film for a living and have seen hundreds of prospects, yet they were genuinely fired up. Parker doesn't know exactly how his first year as a coordinator will go, but the foundation he's building has one specific player at the center of it. Caleb arrived in Dallas already knowing how to run 3 different NFL caliber defensive systems, and that level of intelligence is exactly what this defense was missing. Caleb changes the entire math for a defense just by being on the field, and the Cowboys clearly saw enough on tape to trade up for that kind of impact. So there you have it. Watch this next video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you
just know he gonna be a dog, y'all. He gonna be a dog. He gonna be a dog.
They don't want you to know about it.
Hey, golly, you might bud, freaking Cowboys, bro. Fine. Y'all still ain't about to do nothing, but he's gonna be doing something. Cowboys, but if you're just chimney slacker, subscribe, man. Shit, but first, man, I'm out. First.